Hello, everybody, and welcome back to WM32 Football podcast. Today, I have been joined by a fan of the blue half of Merseyside. So, testing times for him at the moment, given the fact that his rivals are absolutely flying at the minute, well, they were until the coronavirus and COVID-19 had hit. So I've been joined today by McHugh Mahon. Michael, great to have you on with us today. As we mentioned there, you are an Everton fan, an Evertonian, a blue nose, a toffee. How long has your association been with the blue half of Merseyside?
So first of all, Wes, thank you for having me on. I think it's for as long as I can remember, really. I think, I'm 24 now. So, from my earliest memory was about 2001, 2002. So about, 15, 16 years is when I've really, actually more than that, 18. It's been my whole life, really. I think one of the first things I put on was an Everton kit that my dad made me when I was first born. So, it's been a while, the ups and downs.
Brilliant. So with that in mind, then you mentioned there sort of 01, 02 was your first memory. Would you say that that's sort of the season where you went to your first game? And if so, talk me through that experience and what it was like for you going to watch Everton for the first time.
Yeah, I think my dad first took me. I think it was in 2000. I don't really have much memories of that actual game. I just remember being in the main stand with, the Goodison Roar, the famous Goodison Roar, and actually having issues with my ears for the sound. But the first actual game I remember going to was actually in 2002. It was not long after David Moyes took over. Everton won 3-1. It was I don't know if you remember the game. Duncan Ferguson got sent off for throwing a kidney blow at the Bolton centre half. And Everton ended up going on to win 3-1 with a Nick Chadwick goal. So that was the first game I remember, properly remember. One of my memories of Goodison, yeah.
Brilliant. So you mentioned there, obviously going for the first time under Moyes. Whereabouts did you sit? Was it the famous Gladys Street end, or was it somewhere else in the ground?
Yeah, no, it was actually in the family enclosure on the main stand. I don't think my dad was too happy having to go into a family enclosure with no alcohol at the time. But yeah, no, it was a family enclosure. It was me, my uncle, and my dad. Sat in a family enclosure for the first time. So it was. I think I sat in there the first 4 or 5 occasions until we moved to the main stand in the Bullens Road, and then eventually back to the Gladys Street. 13, 14 years later when I got my season ticket.
Excellent. You mentioned there, obviously, you go to gate, or you've been with your dad and uncles and people like that. Are those the people that you usually go to games with, or do you go on your own?
It's a bit of a mix, to be honest, Wes. Obviously started off when I was younger, going with my dad and uncle and my dad's friends. Go in the pub before the game, having a bite to eat, and then heading off the game. Then obviously moved on to I got a season ticket with my little sister. So that was our ritual. Our weekends were going to games, we're going to watch Everton games together at Goodison, and away games sat there in the house with a stream on. And then obviously later on I started going to games by myself. If I managed to get a ticket here and there, I'd travel home from university and go by myself. So it's been a mixture of, really. I've had different phases with different people in my life. So yeah, it's been a wild one.
Yeah, it sounds like a real sort of family affair when you go to Everton as well. And you mentioned there about potentially going to the pub for a little bite to eat or whatnot before games. Is that part of your match day routine, your match day ritual? Do you go to a game and make sure you wear your lucky pants or lucky socks? What are your match day sort of rituals and superstitions?
I think it's. I wouldn't say I've got a superstition. The only one I have done is, whenever I go to an Everton game, I know you've been to Goodison before. Walking through the graveyard next to Goodison Park. It's always been one thing. Every game I always walk through there. I'm not sure why. It's always just the same route that I make. It's always the bus towards Goodison Park, and then walk through the walk through the graveyard. That's probably the only real thing that you could possibly call as a ritual, and it's just something that's never changed really.
Ah, nice, excellent. A bit of a different route, I would probably suggest to what most fans would make. I don't think many would go through a graveyard before going to watch their team play.
With recent experience of Everton, I think it just means that it can't be the worst part of your day, really.
Well, we're going to move on to something now which will be very, very personal sort of to you. And there's probably been some fantastic games that you've seen over the years, but what would you say is probably the best game that you've either been to or that you've witnessed being an Evertonian?
Oh, there's been. I mean, you've got your obvious ones. Your Liverpool when we beat Liverpool 3-0 at Goodison Park back in 2006. Andy Johnson scoring 2 goals, and then obviously your 1-0 win in the FA Cup third round replay with Dan Gosling scoring. I think one personally, there's 2 actually that spring to mind in regards to my personal favourites. One was the FA Cup, I believe it was the 5th round against Chelsea a few years back when Lukaku scored 2 goals when he went on that mazy run and slotted into the bottom corner of the Gladys Street, and the place just erupted. And probably the second one, unfortunately for you, and it's not even the meaning of the game, it was just how it happened, was when we beat Tottenham 2-1 with a Seamus Coleman 90th minute header, and then was it Yelovich in the 93rd minute after Apostolos Velios with an overhead kick. I think them 2 just stick to mind really in regards to the atmosphere, just how crazy things went. It was absolutely nuts. But yeah, they're probably me too, obviously, other than your standards, your Man City 4-0 at home. They're probably the 2 that stand out just through just pure entertainment and atmosphere really.
Yeah, I mean, I remember that game against Chelsea and Lukaku scoring, because I remember hearing that roar of the Gladys Street. And I'd never been to Goodison at that point, and it was always one of those where you go, I'd love to go to one ground that I'd love to go to just to hear that particular roar. And yeah, I remember that game against us against Tottenham that you were mentioning. So I think we'd just come off the back of playing in Europe on the Thursday. So I think the game was on a Sunday, if memory serves me right.
Yeah, Sunday 4:00.
Yeah, so yeah, I remember that. I was absolutely devastated when it popped up and I saw that you'd scored in like the 90th minute. I was just there like, oh no. And then I'd watched the highlights on Match of the Day and was crying at our woeful defending.
I mean, you've got to look at Apostolos Velios on why he's trying to over a kick from the edge of the area, really. But no, obviously that's that Goodison roar. It's what brings you in. As an Everton fan, it's something that it always gives you tingles. But on the opposite side to that, when the fans are against the team, it's not a nice place to be for the home team. And when the fans are behind the team, it's not a nice place to be for the away team. So it is a contrast of what Goodison mood you get as to how the fans are going to react.
Yeah, and you mentioned there obviously when things aren't going so well. With that, what is probably the worst game then that you've been to or that you've witnessed?
So again, I'm gonna go away from the obvious Liverpool hammerings of recent seasons. Nobody wants to talk about them ones. There's 2 that spring to mind again. The first one was the first season under Martinez. I think we played Sunderland, who were rock bottom at the time, at home. It was 20th of December, I think it was. It was in between Christmas and New Year. We got beat 1-0. And we got off to a really good start that season. And if we'd have won that game, we'd have gone unbeaten at Goodison for the full calendar year. And I think Tim Howard got sent off early in the first half after the Leon Osman poor pass, and just it was just the atmosphere just got sucked out. But I think the main one was the FA Cup 6th round against Wigan back in 2013, Moyes' last season, when we got beat 3-0 and conceded 3 goals in 4 minutes. That was, I mean, whether you say it's the worst performance or it was the worst 5 minutes of football I've ever seen in my life, it has to be up there. It was sickening, especially looking at the long-term goal of the club at the time. We were trying to keep Moyes on for a contract before he signed for United. If you looked at the draw after the Wigan game, I think it was Chelsea versus Man City in the semi-final, and Wigan versus Millwall, and it was a great chance to get to Wembley, get to a final, and just to lose it within 4 minutes was heartbreaking.
Yeah, I remember that particular year. I think that's obviously the year that Wigan went on to beat Man City in the final at Wembley. One game that I do want to mention, unfortunately for you, was the 6-2 for Spurs last season. That must have been tough. That must have been tough for you.
Yeah, I think it's always the thing with Everton. I always fancy myself, and I always say to everyone, I fancy myself against anyone at Goodison Park. Like you mentioned before, with the atmosphere and the roar, you feel comfortable and confident. I think, and it's an issue that a lot of fans have had with the team recently, and especially in games like that 6-2, it was a lack of fight. There was no one who'd roll the socks up and put in a big tackle or do something to get the crowd going. It was just very lackluster. And obviously Spurs absolutely dominated Everton, which it's not very often it happens, but when it does, yeah, it's a bitter pill to swallow.
Yeah, and I mean that was my first experience of Goodison Park, that particular game, and yeah, it was a really, really strange game. Obviously, you guys took the lead quite early on, and you get in the away, and me and my dad are thinking, oh no, this could go any way here, and then all of a sudden the game just sort of switched, and then it was almost like near enough anything and everything that we were hitting was going in the back of the net, and whatnot. So yeah, that was a strange old game, I think.
Yeah, it felt like every time you were attacking, you were about to score, and I think it's one thing I know personally as an Everton fan in recent years is you don't feel comfortable with the back four, you don't feel safe, and I think games like you said, the Tottenham game there, the Liverpool game, the Chelsea game, we just get spread open too easily. So I think and it was one of them games where I've never seen our back four look so weak and look so fragile with every attack.
Yeah, I must admit, I was very, very shocked, because when you think about Everton, by and large, for people sort of in and around our age, you think of Everton being defensively solid, and it was like we were just carving you open at any given opportunity, really, and that could have ended up, I think, a lot worse than it actually did. But anyway, moving on from that, because I think that's probably enough of what you want to hear from that particular game. This one there might be a few contenders for this one, this next question that I'm going to ask. But in your time period supporting Everton, who would you say is your favourite player of all time? And give us a reason as to why you've gone with that player.
Oh, I mean, I think other than your obvious, your Duncan Fergusons and whatnot, I think for me, it's got to be Tim Cahill. His desire in every game, he was always up for the battle, and was actually really, really underrated technical footballer. I think it was only once he started becoming a little bit older, the technique we could actually see come through. I think obviously, he was, when you define someone who plays for the badge, he was one who plays for the badge. Big game player, scored in big goals, and yeah, I mean, he was the driving force during my childhood, coming through from 10 onwards. He was the player that you'd looked up to, and it was always in the school playground when a cross coming, it was Tim Cahill banging the header on, not a Steven Gerrard, as many people would say. But yeah, I think for me, Cahill's got to be up there with my favourites. But obviously, there's a lot to mention. Stephen Pienaar, Leighton Baines, Arteta. There's been numerous ones. It was a really difficult choice to pick one favourite, but you never know. Some of the current squad may come along and take over that mantle.
Yeah, I think no one's gonna really begrudge you of Tim Cahill. I think what he did for Everton in that time period, especially under David Moyes, was remarkable. And actually, for somebody who's not particularly massive in terms of a 6 foot plus sort of player, was unbelievably good in the air. And you mentioned there's some headers. I think he the amount of times he'd pop up with an important header or even just an important goal for Everton over those periods was just incredible, really. And the fact that I think as well that he'd come from what is now the Championship and took to the Premier League like a duck to water, I think that helped as well. But you mentioned there about the current crop of Everton players. Who out of this particular current crop now is your favourite, and why?
I mean, it's got to be Richarlison. He's a mixture of your typical Everton, what you used to, and what the older fans of Everton are used to. Your hard working player. Okay, he spends a bit of time on the floor, but he'll graft, he'll put his foot in. He likes to nibble at players, but then he's also got the technique, which is what Everton are looking for. I think technically he's a really, really good player. And combining the two of work rate and technicality, technique, sorry. Yeah, he's, for me, if he stays, and it's a big if, he could become an Everton icon in years to come.
Do you think, obviously, there's been a lot of interest in Richarlison from some of the bigger clubs in Europe? There was talk of him going to Barcelona and whatnot. Do you potentially see Richarlison heading that way, or do you think now, especially with who you've got in charge, he might actually look and stay a little bit longer?
So I mean, you could never begrudge him, could you, for going for one of Europe's elites? I get what you're saying with Ancelotti. I think it all depends on the recruitment. Whenever the next transfer window opens, it's all well and good saying, yeah, we've got Ancelotti in charge and we've got Mercedes money or whatnot. But I think it's, as Everton have proven in the past few seasons, our recruitment's not been the best. So I wouldn't be shocked if he does hold out for at least one more season, maybe two. Give Ancelotti a full season under his belt. And let's see where we're going with that, because it's all well and good as signing your Andre Gomez and Luca Dean, who I think are really good football players, but they're your failed elite players. And if Everton want to get into the elite, we need to be signing elite players and not those who have dropped down. So I think it'll all be dependent on recruitment as to how he feels. He looks and feels loved at the club, both on the pitch and off the pitch. I don't know whether you've seen Everton Twitter, but everything he does is like gold dust. So I think it will all be dependent on recruitment, I think, and how we can strengthen in the summer, or whenever the transfer window opens.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really, really interesting point, because I think yourself there, you could have easily touted him for one of the more established, like you said, European elite clubs, but then, like you say, I think it's very dependent on the recruitment. And when we did our Talking Everton podcast, we spoke about a lot of Everton's recruitment and what it's been like over the last couple of years as well. Michael, just going on to the next bit now, if you could give me one, if possible, if not a couple, but probably your most memorable moment being an Everton fan.
Most memorable moment. I mean, the FA Cup semi-final win against Man United in 2009 on penalties. For me, obviously, being at Wembley at the time was, it was just ridiculous, and the whole day in general just brings back memories. Being there with my sister and my dad, seeing Everton actually win a penalty shootout for one was ridiculous, because I think we went out the season before to Fiorentina in the Europa League, or the European Cup at the time, and that was heartbreak. So to see us actually win a penalty shootout, that one just for the whole day. But again, another one that wasn't actually a win was the Everton-Liverpool 3-3 at Goodison Park, and just being in the crowd for when Lukaku scored his second goal, the bullet header. Just you were hugging like random men, giving, it was ridiculous. They're probably two of my most favourite memories, from Everton. Even if it didn't end in how you'd want it to end, it was always a case of, it's just that looking back on it, it's like I was there, I was at that game. So
yeah, sometimes it can be just a I was there moment that stands out for you. But no,
Yeah.
fantastic, and quite a bit of a contrast as well. Obviously, you've got both are sort of adulation type of moments, but one is more sort of a family orientated moment, with obviously with you being at Wembley, and then the other one is literally a moment in time where you go, that particular moment there just stands out for me just because of the significance and the importance of it all, and whatnot. So I like the contrast between those two. So thanks for that. Moving on, I potentially have a feeling which ones might come out for this one. But what would you say has been the lowest point supporting Everton?
Ooh, I mean, it's been quite a few over recent years, hasn't it? I mean, I've listened to a couple of podcasts. Obviously, I'm in the lucky ones that Everton have never really been, well, other than the Great Escape of, I believe it was 88, 89 or 87, 88. We beat Wimbledon on the last day of the season, which I wasn't old enough to remember. I think it's got to be your Derby defeats. The huge defeats to Liverpool, but also the season with Martinez's first season when we were touted to finish fourth. Just beat Arsenal at home 3-0, on course to finish fourth, and then Crystal Palace away turned up. Crystal Palace at home, and he beat us 3-2. And I think it was that we're all going on a European tour but we're not actually going to the Champions League anymore. I think that one, it was just in that moment, I think the whole world just stopped.
No, interesting that you mentioned that. And then obviously the recent Derby defeat in the FA Cup to Liverpool. Where does that rank then in terms of low points? Because there was a massive backlash from a lot of people within that game.
I mean, I know it's probably going to sound silly, but it was one of them ones where I kind of expected something silly to happen. And, it's not great for you to support your team and expect that. And, you'd expect an Everton team that was put out to win. But I think, for me, it was more humiliating than a low point. Because, it was an FA Cup third round. Yeah, it was the possibility of a cup run. But it was more humiliation than a low point. I think there were bigger important games that we did lose. Or failed to win in some occasions. But the recent one, to me, obviously, as much as it hurt, it was more, like I say, it was more humiliation and disappointment than anything else, really.
No, it's interesting that you mentioned that it's more sort of humiliating because, like I say, there's a massive backlash from Everton and within the media as well regarding that particular game because obviously Liverpool would pretty much, anybody that plays Football Manager, they basically they press the pick rotated squad option for that game.
Yeah, and just got all the youngest players.
Yeah, and Everton actually went quite strong. So, yeah, it was interesting that you said that. And I think a lot of people were obviously expecting Everton to go and win that game, especially when the team sheets come in. And like I say, Liverpool pressed the pick rotated squad option on Football Manager and Everton had pretty much gone as strong as they could have gone. So, no, really interesting take on that particular game.
I mean, obviously, like I say, it was definitely a low point, of being an Everton fan. No Derby defeat is something that you want as a club. But I think it was kind of one of that. Once the teams are released, the hype, obviously, social media, the actual media itself. It was always Everton should win. I think it was the hype of the media that that obviously brought everything crumbling down, really.
Yeah, no, like I say, again, an interesting take on it from your perspective, there, Michael. Obviously, Everton have had, I would say, quite a few different managers in your lifetime. Obviously, David Moyes is probably the longest serving one out of the lot of those, but out of the ones that you've been able to witness, who would you say has been the best in your lifetime?
Well, I mean, over the Moyes, I think we've probably got a combined time. It could have been about 2 years since Moyes. I've got to be honest. I think it's got to be the Roberto Martinez 2013-2014 team. The team that finished fifth. You know, just the attacking football. You had Lukaku, Barkley, Deulofeu Morales as your front four, and then you had James McCarthy and Gareth Barry, Coleman, Baines, Distan Jagielka and Howard. I think that for me, that team, you know, it was a case of when you say attack for defence, that's what it was like. It was give the ball to your front players, get on the run, get your two wing backs, bomb them forward, because I think Coleman scored 7 or 8 goals that season. You know, get them bomb forward and just have your two centre midfielders and your back two just holding the forward to the back. So that was probably the most exciting time as an Everton fan. Ancelotti's obviously the biggest name. Let's see, we've had what, 4 months of him, 5 months of him. Obviously the season's been cut short, so it'll be interesting to see how he handles a team like Everton.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting point there, and I think, you know, that Everton team, especially under Martinez, I think sometimes the football that you guys were playing was fantastic, and then I think you guys were on the road to and on a path and a journey to something really, really good, and then for some strange reason or another, it just seemed to have flipped and gone wrong somewhere. Obviously, Roberto losing his job, unfortunately for him. So from best then to worst, who would you say has been the worst manager of your Everton lifetime?
I mean, the easy answer is for me would be Sam Allardyce. You know, as you're aware, the Everton fans absolutely slaughtered Sam Allardyce. I think, you know, sometimes it was, you know, a little bit harsh, a little bit uncalled for. You know, don't get me wrong, I didn't find the style of football attractive at all. I think it was very, you know, very negative and very, you know, narrow. But I also think that, you know, he got results. At the end of the day, football's a results-driven business. So he did set the standard for us to push on, and obviously ended up with Marco Silva. I think you could possibly look at early on in my Everton fandom, shall we say, at Walter Smith. Obviously ex-Rangers manager who David Moyes took over from. So yeah, he was obviously there for 4 years, but we obviously didn't do much there. I think if you look at the percentages of wins, you could possibly look at Walter Smith. But for me, style of football wise, I think you've got to go with Sam Allardyce.
No, interesting. Where then does Marco Silva and Ronald Koeman rank for you? Obviously, those time periods weren't exactly the greatest, especially with Koeman. I think there was some fantastic times with Koeman, but then obviously the way that ended wasn't great, and then the whole Marco Silva saga, if you like. So where do those two sort of rank?
So for me, I think the Marco Silva one's the hardest one for me, because, you know, the first half of the season we weren't great. Let's not beat around the bush with that one. But then you looked at the second half of the season, and I think obviously, especially last season, we beat Man United 4-0 at home, we beat Chelsea 2-0 at home. You know, we drew with Liverpool. We got some really good results towards the back end of the season, and you thought, you know, that's now the push on to move forward. So, you know, for that to come to an abrupt end, you know, especially with this season was quite poor. So I'd say the thing with Silva is we had some good streaks and we had some bad streaks. Just unfortunately, our poor streaks were more common than our win streaks. With Koeman, I feel like Koeman was let down actually by the recruitment. I know we touched on recruitment earlier on today, earlier on the podcast, sorry, but I think for me, Koeman was let down by being under Steve Walsh as a director of football. You know, I think we signed was Klaas and Rooney, a few other number 10s. We didn't really strengthen the positions needed. I feel like if Koeman would have had his say on who he wanted, I think he may have been a little bit, you know, his win percentage and also his time at Everton would be a little bit more fruitful than it actually was, and it actually turned out to be really sour.
No, it's quite interesting there. I think I personally, I agree in the sense that Koeman was sort of let down by his recruitment. You know, you mentioned there, I think in one window you bought Davy Klaassen, Rooney, and Sigurdsson, all three players that all play in a similar position, and then it's like, right, Ronald, go and get the best out of them three for us. So yeah, no, I do agree with you on that Koeman was let down on his recruitment. Excluding Goodison, then Michael, what would you say has been your favourite ground that you've been to?
I mean, for everything, I think it's got to be the King Power. So I mean, I don't know whether it was just obviously you hear the atmosphere of the King Power Stadium, you know, when you watch it on TV. But I went there about 6 years ago. First game of the season, Everton drew 2-2. Obviously, I think they had the clappers at the time, which, you know, I'm not a big fan of, but it creates a bit of atmosphere. You know, it's a mixture of an old-fashioned but an up-to-date ground, and I think that was gorgeous. But also, obviously, St James's Park, it's beautiful. Up at Newcastle, but for me, I think King Power edges it.
Interesting choice, because I've been to the King Power a couple of times, and I must say it is a lovely stadium, and whatnot. I agree with you on the atmosphere point that you made, and with the clappers, I'm not a massive fan of it either. But no, it's an interesting one that you mentioned there, just because obviously it's a little bit different. And you know, I've heard people say about the view that you get from the away end at St James's Park as well. I've not actually managed to go yet, and I am hoping to go fairly soon. But I know that people that have gone, and I've spoken to them, and they've said that the view that you get from the away end, I know it's however high it is, and once you get there, you're knackered. But you know, once you are there, they said the view is fantastic. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, a guy of my size, as you know, it struggled to get up them stairs. I'm not gonna lie to you. But no, yeah, that the view from there, obviously you can look over Newcastle City Centre. It is beautiful. Unfortunately, when I got down there, you know, the view is probably the best thing I've seen on display on the day, because we got 3-2. But no, honestly, it is. I mean, the view from the top of St James's is gorgeous. I think I was like 5 rows from the top, so you could see the whole thing. But yeah, I think it's one of your typical ones, isn't it? You St James's Park, you know, you hear about your Old Trafford, your Etihad, your Anfield, stuff like that. For me, definitely the King Power, just for everything, really.
No, I like that a lot. And this one again, excluding Goodison, which is your least favourite ground that you've been to?
I think it's got to be the Hawthorns. I'm not sure. Have you ever been to the Hawthorns before?
I haven't been, but I think again, you know, I know a couple of fans that have been, and they sort of made it their thing when West Brom were in the Premier League to go to West Brom away, and they've said similar, that it's a bit of a dive of a place to get to. I think you're almost shoehorned in to the away end as well.
Yeah, I mean, I went on a Monday night 8 o'clock kick-off, so it was pitch black, and you've got to walk down like a little alleyway to get to obviously get to the stadium, and you know, having a few drinks, trying to get through there in pitch black's not the nicest thing to do. I'm not gonna lie to you. But yeah, just when you get in, it wasn't the greatest stadium. Let's just leave it at that one.
Yeah, no, I think obviously the people that I'd spoken to about the Hawthorns have said the same thing. Like you shoehorn down an alleyway and whatnot, and it's not the greatest away end either. But yeah, no. So obviously, when you mentioned it there, I haven't been myself, but obviously knowing people that have gone, I can sort of understand what you mean. Final one then from me, Michael. What would you say your hopes are for Everton next season?
I think it's got to be Europe. You know, we especially now with Angelotti in charge, you know, with the Bramley Moor dock on the horizon in maybe 4 or 5 years time. I think we've got to be looking at least Europe and getting back onto European tours. If you'd asked me the question this time 3 or 4 months ago, I'd be saying Champions League, because I think the league in this current state, you know, other than Man City and Liverpool, obviously your two high flyers. There's not really been, you know, Leicester have made that jump this season. I think, you know, Chelsea were there for the taking. United have been there for the taking this year. So I think you're hopefully looking at, and obviously forgetting Spurs there, who have been up and down all season. So I think, you know, get into the European places and maybe a cup run next season, and then from there, and with Angelotti having the recruitment and his players in, obviously there's a lot of talks of transfer targets at the moment. Is from then we can push on to hopefully in 3 or 4 years time looking long distance as having Champions League as we head on into the new stadium.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen the plans for the new stadium at Bramley Moor Dock, and it does look like an unbelievable sporting arena as well.
Yeah.
And it looks like one that's not just fit for football, but other sporting events, you know, concerts, boxing, and things like that, and as well.
Yeah,
so
I think it's definitely something that I think the club are looking into. You know, as we say, we Goodison Park, it's a gorgeous old-fashioned stadium. But you know, we held the Tony Bellew fight there against McHugh a few years ago. And obviously, I went to it, but you know, it's not built for your other sporting events. It's just built for football. But I think, you know, obviously, me personally, I think as much as the memories, and I don't think you'll recreate the atmosphere of Goodison Park at the Bramley Moor Dock. I believe, you know, it's a little bit like, you know, I've had conversations with you know, older generations of Everton fans who don't want to leave Goodison Park, but for simple reasons. But it's pretty similar in the taste of the team as well. You know, they're used to the Goodison roar, the hostile atmosphere that they want to keep. Whereas, you know, people like yourself were more into, you know, flair players, your Richarlisons, your Bernards, who aren't exactly, like we mentioned before, your typical Everton players. And I think, you know, that style of football moving into a new stadium with the potential of bigger and better revenue from obviously other sporting events, and obviously being on the docks of the Royal Blue Mersey, it'll be a sight to behold.
Yeah, hopefully you'll be able to get down and watch Everton in that new stadium as well. Michael, unfortunately, we are done. We are out of time. And I just want to take a moment to thank you for coming on and sharing your Everton stories and your Everton experiences being a fan. Guys, we are also on Spotify, so give us a follow on there at WM32Football. And the interview will also be live on YouTube, so please give us a like, a comment, and drop a subscribe onto the YouTube channel as well. Again, that is WM32Football. Once again, Michael McHugh Mahon, thank you ever so much for your time.
Thank you very much for having me. Cheers.
Thank you.